Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm Tom Shellcross, licensed agent with Second City Real Estate. With me, as always, is Mark Ainley, owner and founder of GC Realty. Mark, you got some decently big news to share.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm excited because the new year's back, and spent a lot of time listening to podcasts over the break, but not recording any. And like, it made me sad. Like we kind of took a couple weeks off there. So I'm excited to be back with that. And one of the other things I did on December 31st, right before actually pricing went up, is that was my main motivation for doing it. But I joined GoBundance, and that was something that I've never heard of GoBundance up until we had David Green on, and I know you'll know the episode here last 85. Year. All right. And, but that's the first I heard of it. And then actually my partner, Cliff, he joined it for a year, and then he said this would be something that I'd really enjoy. So and it looks like we have a pretty good Chicago network here. I mean, Jonathan Clem and Brian K. I can never say his last name right. Maybe you can help me, but
Kokendorfer, right? The Essex Realtor.
Yeah. Episode 14 and 160. I know that, but those guys are all in GoBundance, and they have like a GoBundance Chicago networking group. So I'm really excited to jump into it on a local and a national level for this year.
Well, good for you. That's exciting stuff.
Yeah. So
when you're doing all your planning there and your personals, make sure you include podcast goals. Don't leave me behind here.
No, for sure. And you and me have some strategic planning for the year coming up. So that's something else that we're doing this year that's different from previous years. So we're actually going to meet in person and sit down we have booked 3 hours to kind of go over what we want to do with the show. So we talk about other people having their goals and their plans all the time, and you and me are going to get on some of the same pages too.
Yeah. Exciting stuff. So what about our housing provider tip of the week? First one, this is the first recording of the new year. This will air, end of January, early February, but the first one being recorded. What is it for 2023?
Yeah. So just over the break, we went through some crazy weather. We had some snow, and then we had some ice, and then we had some really deep plunging temperatures. I think in a 24-hour period, I think we had 138 work orders related to the cold. I mean, we have to go out for everything. We had to troubleshoot some stuff and talk people through it, but that's a crazy amount. And that is even with us in advance going out and kind of preparing tenants, letting them know, hey, this is going to happen. This is what I need from you. Or if this happens, this is what we need you to do. But my tip for today is to really be out ahead of that and plan as much as you can. You can't plan if your pipes are frozen, but you can do things, put things in place to help have your best chance of them not being frozen, whether it be talking to your tenants about minimum temperatures, talking, for us, a big conversation was, this is the holiday weekend and you're going to probably travel. So this is what I need you to focus on before you leave town for 3 days. Whether it be opening up the cabinets, whether it be making sure the hose in the yard finally got taken off the hose bib, which it should have been already at that point, but just double checking. And if this happens, make sure you call us right away. One of those things like, hey, if the water starts coming out slow, call us right away and we'll help you get it back. And there's certain things as a landlord, you want to make sure you're prepared to do too, because just because they call you and say something is slow drip doesn't mean you have to send out a plumber right away. And the plumber might even be busy because he's dealing with all these other problems, trying to unfreeze somebody's serious problem. So you're going to fall to the bottom of the priority list for them. So knowing how to troubleshoot some of these things also is going to be huge for you and be able to combat these things. Because sometimes, I would say we had a few dozen getting frozen pipes, I guess, getting to the point where they're frozen. They weren't 100% frozen through and through. So we were able to take tenants and actually walk them through getting back to, free flowing water. And over the next couple of days, keeping an eye on those to make sure that it didn't go back to that. So just be ready. Make sure your tenants are ready. Give them advice in advance. If you have a building that you've had issues in the past, make sure that you are maybe following up with those tenants actively, make sure that they're in town. So just be really proactive. And then, of course, on the backside, we always talk about this, you have to be super reactive when something does happen, whether it be just to troubleshoot them or make sure, another thing about being prepared is, we talk to all of our vendors and say, hey, listen, it's going to be a rough week here and we're going to the holidays. So we need to know who's in and who's out, who's going to be able to help us. And we have awesome vendors with some of that stuff. And we had our in-house maintenance team that's on call, but we got all of our team that's on our side kind of in line to make sure that they're ready to go. So be ready, have a plan, be able to react, make sure you know what your resources are, make sure you know what you got to do to troubleshoot, and you'll have far less issues. So.
All right. Nicely put. Today's guest, we have our friend back on. So one of the originals, he was episode 9 with us. We had him back on 122 as well when he talked through a couple deals. He's been on several Tuesday tips. And today we're going to be breaking down, front to end from time of acquisition to current state of a multifamily property he bought, just almost the oral history behind the scenes of the good, the bad, and everything on the table. He's the managing broker of Forte Properties, a local investor with over 150 doors. Without further ado, John Warren, welcome back, man. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you guys for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So, John, last time you were on, I remember the internet wasn't working great, so you had to open a window to get it to work. You're in the basement of one of your buildings now, I believe. So, hopefully our Wi-Fi is good down there.
In the back cave, but I've got dedicated Wi-Fi, so fingers crossed.
Hold on. That episode made an impression on people, because I've heard that open your window to help your internet like a couple of times as people like sending me texts. But then last week, Shay's only been with us for a few months now. Something was happening with our office internet. He's like, hey man, maybe we should go open the windows. And I thought at first, I'm like, this is such a dumb idea. But ultimately he was being funny about this episode that happened years ago. Like, I don't know. So that episode made an impression on a lot of people.
That's pretty awesome.
We'll add it to our merch store t-shirt. Just open up the window.
That's awesome.
All right. So John, let's talk about this building here. When did you first start chasing this thing? Give us how did it come across your desk?
Yeah, this would have been a little over a year and a half ago. So probably midway through 2021. One of the commercial brokers that I work with in this area texted me and said, hey, I think I'm going to have to pass on this listing because this older seller just doesn't work with an agent. Would you mind submitting an offer? Said you'd have to pay his commission, all that good stuff. And I said, sure, if the price is right, let's do it. And funny enough, up to that point, I had never done a deal with this particular broker. And so I said, all right, this is a great opportunity. Of course, I'll pay your commission. So we submitted an offer. We submitted it right away, like same day. So
real quick, take a step back here. Where are we geography wise? Is this in Cicero? Is it near your other buildings?
Yeah, this is in Cicero, very, very close to a couple of other buildings that we had just purchased. So I was, very excited about the deal because it was something I could drive by, that day. I thought, yeah, let's lock it down because the pricing was really good that he was talking about. So we decided to write an offer.
And now this is sight unseen though, right? Like we haven't walked units. We don't have a rent roll. The original offer is.
Yeah, good call. You know what? So backing up a little bit. So I knew from the front end that we would not really be able to see most of this building. There were a handful of vacant units that he told me he could probably get me into for the inspection. But he's like, you're going to have to write an offer sight unseen. So definitely not something for the faint of heart here, right? You have to kind of know what you're getting into from the front end to lock this deal up.
And how did you know him though? I know you said you never did a deal with him, and you had to take that type of information and trust him that he's not like just trying to sell you crap or lead you down a pipeline that's going to lead you down a rabbit hole that's going to just take up your time. Like go back, because I think a big part of this podcast is educating people on the power of networking. And I'd love to hear kind of at a very deep level how you met this guy, your communication over however long a period of time it was, and kind of how you got to that phone call.
So going way back to 2015, when I started in this business, like a lot of investors, I thought most commercial brokers are trying to pull your leg, sell everything for too much, all that kind of thing. So I discounted a lot of the really good brokers early on, which was a huge mistake. And as I started to kind of figure out how the game is played in commercial versus, like a residential property, there is no big MLS where everybody can see it. And it's kind of, egalitarian. Everybody can see all the deals. Instead, commercial brokers will, they'll market the properties to people that they think are the strongest buyers first, so to speak, especially the really good deals, because the really good deals are also the hardest deals to close. So anyway, long story short, is this particular broker had showed me many deals when I was really green. And I passed on those deals like an idiot, and I should have bought probably all of them in, hindsight being 2020. And so I had talked with him for quite a while and said, hey, I even took pictures of one of them. It was this 38 unit courtyard building in Berwyn that I didn't buy. And I took a couple pictures, was like, oh man, this is the one that got away every time I drive by. So I've been talking to him for a long time. He's again, there's a handful of brokers that control all the, kind of mid-sized deals in these markets. As you know, Mark, I mean, you've been in the space for a long time. So I'd slowly kind of grown up and cut my teeth as a multifamily investor. And I think he as a broker is a similar age. So he kind of saw me go from, total amateur hour that has no idea what he's doing to trying to figure it out and understanding quite a bit about this area from owning buildings and knowing that there's a lot I don't know, but there's a lot that I do know.
So that's crazy. That's 6 years. If you break that down, like to get to this deal, and that's just a relationship that was worked on, and sometimes those will yield rewards sooner than later. But I think no matter what, the guy respected you and you respected him, and you guys both saw opportunity in each other at some point. So I just want to make sure that's pointed out to everybody. You took it. So you started moving really faster, and the whole goal of this episode is to really be deep. All right. So
yeah, move me slow, Mark. So
you took a phone call from him.
Yeah.
Give me even down to like, you weren't even planning on getting that phone call that day. Like, how fast did you move? Like, did you start talking offer like that same day? Was it? It
was a text message. So he text messaged me. I still remember it because it was like sort of an unfinished OM, like the brokers will send out when they have a deal. And it's like, hey, what's your interest level? And I mean, my interest level was very high. We were looking for a building, the partner and I was working with, and this was right in our kind of our sweet spot for what we were looking for in terms of area. The pricing, that he was talking about was really, really attractive. So I said, it's a no-brainer. So I was trying to move as quickly as possible, like get an offer out same day. I knew the attorney, who is a local attorney who's a mayor of another town nearby. So I actually drove with earnest money to the office the next day, hoping to lock this deal down, and was super bummed to find out that another buyer had put it under contract. So within like a couple of days, it came out there was another buyer that had it under contract. So then I kind of wrote the deal off, actually. Like, oh, darn, missed on that one. It is what it is, And kind of the next step, though, is that the deal ended up coming back. I don't remember the exact timing. It's probably about a month later. There's these point of sale inspections they do whenever a building sells. And that's where a lot of buyers will back out of contracts. And that's exactly what happened. So this building is
how tough is Cicero on that? The point of sale inspections, are they brutal to be business? It's better to be a buyer than a seller. Like, tell us about Cicero and dealing with them. Just specific. I know we'll talk more about Cicero, but just specific about the point of sale process.
I think the point of sale process is, I don't want to say it's bad. I guess as I've gotten into this more, I realize it's very thorough. And Cicero in particular really crushed this building, and rightfully so. It had a lot of problems with it. And so the report was just a mile long. Everything from pest infestations to needing certifications on all the systems, heating, electrical, roofing, needed like a full tuck pointing job. The porches were pretty much condemned to be torn down. Like the whole building needed to be renovated. And in fact,
so real quick, John, did you, you sight unseen, because I mean, I've done this as well. Like, talk to us a little about just coming up with that rehab number, right? You kind of go in like, it's never perfect, but like, you're kind of expecting like, all right, I need porches. I'm going to assume the roof is shot. Like, was there just a catch-all like X hundreds of thousands of dollars to put in, like when you're modeling out your number, right? You had to put some sort of number on paper.
Because you figured that out before you probably put that first offer in, before you even came back to you. You probably had a mindset already. How'd you do that quick analysis?
What's really helpful is we had just done a 22-unit project here in Cicero with the same general contractor I was planning on using the year before. So the nice thing was I was kind of able to copy and paste some of the same numbers in terms of like the unit renovation numbers and things like that. The building needed mostly everything. The roof was the only thing we didn't have to really completely replace as far as major systems. But and when I say sight unseen, I did drive to the building and walk around the building. So, I did as much due diligence as I could, even walking into hallways and stuff like that, because the doors were just wide open. So I poked around, as much as I could, kind of get a feel for what needed to be done.
You do that. And then just a quick tip as well, just old listings, right? If the guy used Zillow at any point, you're going to find some sort of pictures to give you, they're not going to be perfect, but some sort of guideline.
Totally. This owner had never heard of Zillow. I'm pretty sure this was an older owner. And yeah, I mean, this building, it really hadn't traded in a long time, and there wasn't a whole lot of information. But again, the nice thing was we own and manage a building about 3 blocks down with the exact same build style. So I knew the unit designs and things like that. So I had a lot of advantages going in that somebody from maybe a different market wouldn't have. But yeah, it's still tough to put together a renovation budget, Mark, like you referenced on the fly. I mean, just without even looking at a place.
That's an advantage that anyone listening that's local versus the out of state people, we've talked about how you have such an upper hand being local. Is someone out of state can't just drive over there, and they can send someone over there. But here, you as a local person are able, and I do this all the time. I push into any door that's open, I'll go into on a property that I'm potentially looking to buy, basements and hallways. And most of the time you can always find a way into any of these common area buildings, especially if they've been managed for a really long time, the locks aren't working. And that's usually part of the problem why they're struggling with. But that's such a huge piece to be able to, and you see the hallways, you can see a lot of times pest infestation issues in hallways even, or basements that are left unopened. So that's great that you're able to really kind of get through there. With your list that came back from the city, did you resubmit your offer right away? Did you change it now that you knew some more facts from the city? Like, to talk to me like kind of the mindset when you saw that letter from the city and how in depth it was.
So I guess there's two sides of that. The one is that I expected it to be pretty bad, because again, this building really deserved it. I think a lot of these cities get bad reps for being tough on building owners, but this building really needed some love. So I didn't change the offer necessarily right away based on that, but when I got the second opportunity, I had a second to pause and think. And our initial offer was about $30,000 more than we actually paid for the deal. And we were using a bridge money, hard money lender, whatever you'd like to call it. And speaking of your team, I called the main guy there, Jan. I said, "Hey, what do you think of this deal? What do you think I should do? I have an opportunity here." And at this point, this isn't being marketed, right? This is just coming back to me. He's like, "We have the ability to close quickly here. At that point, we've already looked at the property, because we did get a chance to go in after we got a second look, and they just wanted to see the property and come through and kind of verify that my business plan wasn't total garbage. That was done." So he's like, "You have the opportunity to really renegotiate here." So he said, "Hey, we'll close as is, where is, no more rent rolls, none of that stuff. We can close in a week, but we want a new price." So we actually went $40,000 down. And then they came up 10,000 and we settled.
How much time at this point transpired between you getting it back under contract? So you heard the deal fell apart, you resubmitted an offer, went under contract. Did you actually do your own physical inspection, like hire a home inspector? Or?
We didn't hire a home inspector. I mean, again, this deal was so rough that it really wasn't a home inspector type of deal. I was assuming all the major systems have to be replaced. So, I mean, I'm budgeting for complete replacement of HVAC, plumbing, and electrical. So no, I didn't inspect this deal. I did go through and look at as many units as I could. Can I confirm my scope of work? But no, we didn't use a home inspector.
What about the roof? Any issues there or concerns there that when you're underwriting this, did you know you had to redo something with it?
So even when I'm doing quote sight unseen deals, I don't know if you guys do this. This is terrible, but I just send my roofer up there anyway.
Yeah.
I just have them run by, because really roofs, they can just zip up there with a tall ladder, and So I had him take a look at the roof. Shockingly, the only two things that had been done well in this building, actually there were three things that had been done CapEx wise. A tear off roof had been done about 7 or 8 years before, so it's a big flat roof. So still there was a ton of life left in that whole system. So that was kind of a nice thing. And then in the basement, all the pipes, the copper horizontals had all been replaced by a licensed and bonded plumber with shutoffs for each unit, which was pretty awesome.
Oh,
and
wow.
As you know, very uncommon for these types of buildings that are run down. So, and then the last thing that didn't really help us was their boiler had been replaced 5 years before, but we ended up abandoning the boiler after a couple months of operating. It was a steam system and just didn't make sense to keep it.
You bring up a good point there. So you just listed off 3 pretty valuable things on a building like there. I mean, you add up those 3 things, having to redo it, you're at another 250,000, right?
A lot of cash.
So I know one thing when we were buying heavy, we always looked for something to build around, whether it been, we had a list of 10 things. And if it had 3 of these 10 things, at least it wasn't a total everything you got to do. So which takes away some of that risk. If you don't got to mess with the roof, you do got less risk. If you don't have to worry about the copper coming in or upgrading to copper to come in, that's huge. If you wanted the option to stick around with the boiler for a longer time, it was going to be, oh no, we got to get this done by winter. That's huge too.
Yeah, totally. I think the copper was probably one of the nicest things in the project, being able to shut off individual units as we went. for the construction was really awesome. I mean, it kind of it made the process a lot easier for the general contractor for sure.
Now, did you appreciate those three things at the time, or is it just kind of like in the background? Because I think that's a skill you have to build.
I did. You know, I think this was, I don't know which deal this was, maybe my 10th or 11th deal. So I had enough knowledge at this point to know that, especially the copper, that's really awesome. I knew it'd still replace the risers, but I also knew that it would be a heck of a lot easier and cheaper, and also just operationally better because we could keep the rest of the building running while we did it. So I really appreciated those two elements a lot. And like you said, Mark, and you look for what you can build around when you're doing a total turnaround play. I don't think anybody really replaces everything. You replace what needs to be replaced, and you try to find the operational efficiencies that you can as you're diving into these bigger projects.
Let's talk about that boiler for a second. So this is interesting to me. How many units is this building?
This was a 13 unit building. So kind of your corner 13 unit, 2-story walk up.
Yep.
Chicago building.
All right. So what, I guess a broader question is, the tenant base that's there, probably very low rents given the condition of the building. Were you planning on turnover? Like, talk about that execution, and then that leads into the boiler question. Because how do you get 13 HVAC systems up and running? Like, that seems like a nightmare to me. Like, I love doing this on 3 units and 4 units, ripping it off, putting them in when it's vacant and it's easy. When it's half occupied, like that seems like a nightmare.
Average rent too, and be curious of what before.
Yeah, I mean, the average incoming rents were very low, $600, $700. And kind of to your point, Tom, we might even be able to file this under mistakes made instead of like how well I planned, because I think we initially wanted to keep the boiler operational because that seemed like the easiest path to turning the entire building over and getting it rent ready unit by unit instead of having to shut things down. Yeah, that boiler system, what I realized is the boiler was in good shape because it was a newer Weil McLean steam boiler, which is great. Probably had 40 years of life left on it, but the delivery system for the steam boiler was just Swiss cheese. And these pipes, like, you know, I think we started repairing 1 or 2 here or there, and we're like, this is going to be a nightmare. Like, the wood floors were all shot around them. The pipes were leaking everywhere. Every single part on the radiators pretty much needed to be adjusted in some fashion. And you start doing the math on the system and you're like, man, we're going to spend like $2,000 a unit to keep the boiler system running. And honestly, the general contractor we hired gave us such an efficient price to do HVAC that it just didn't make sense to keep the system. And that was combined with, this was the start of the ramp up in the natural gas prices. So we got a big old gas bill, like $1,000, I think was the first one. And I was like, oh man, we're doing this. We're getting rid of these, we're getting rid of the steam boiler. So we canceled it, mid-project, which again was kind of silly,
That's such a good point you bring up there, because I've watched a couple of our clients that brought on brand new buildings, got brand new boilers, and they're really excited. Again,
system.
Yep. That's one of the 3 things that they're building their rehab around, or their value that they're getting out of it. And it ends up that boiler might only be X amount of years or months old, but the rest of the system's 120 years old or 60 years old or 7 years old. And those radiators are getting tougher and tougher to come by, or they're making it sound like it these days. It feels like, and the cost to get them. And those aren't just things you go buy at Ace either. So you need somebody that specializes in it. So I think when you're evaluating those systems, I think it's so huge to kind of look at everything. Yeah, you get all that damage around the hardwood. Yeah, like that. Those are all like real like. If one radiator doesn't work in 6 units, that's a big problem across 6 units. 6 people complaining that their heat is inconsistent. And they say these newer boiler systems or units actually have different pressures, which end up causing issues within these the delivery system, call it.
Yeah, so it was a mistake to try to keep that boiler, though, to answer your question indirectly, Tom, because the other thing that I did wrong along the same line, which was mistake number 2, I had a lot of success in a couple previous deals keeping existing tenant base in place and renovating around them and kind of moving people in between units. And I mean, I think my assumption's always been most tenants are good people and intend to pay rent. This particular building, there were 2 or 3 okay tenants, and the rest were just a den of thieves. I mean, yeah, and we can dig as deep as you guys want into this, but there was drug use, there was gang like almost all the units had gang affiliations. There was theft. It was wild. So.
We'll dig more into that. Let's go back. We're right before closing. Sorry, listeners, we're jumping around a little here. But
yeah. Jump back to
you're
closing.
right before closing. If I heard you correctly, your lender base said, "Hey, listen, here's your money. Go renegotiate and see if you can save money." Am I hearing that right? Like, what a great like team player to have on your team of like being able to help you leverage the deal.
Yeah, no, my lender was like, look, you have this. We're your superpower. We can close fast here. It's essentially cash. It's like use that to help pay for the expensive interest rate and points and all that stuff that comes along with us. Which he was 100% correct. You know, we were able to negotiate about $30,000 difference, which it did paid for us using that aggressive lender to close quickly.
What was the final purchase price?
It was fine. I had it written down. I just closed my my notes. It was 520,000.
520,000. Okay. So you get to closing table. I mean, you're supposed to be getting rents the day after. You're supposed to get work orders, calls the next day. Now you're the new owner manager of record. Like, oh, let me take one step back. You have this long list for Cicero. What happened? Did you have to sign an affidavit? Did you have to put a bond up? Like, tell us about how you handle that with Cicero.
Cicero's process is pretty straightforward. You pay a $100 fee, and then you have 9 months from that day to correct everything. It's kind of an inflexible system, but it's a very simple one. And so,
what are you signing? You're signing something saying,
yeah, you're signing that you're going to, exactly, Mark, you got it. You're signing that you're going to correct all the violations in 9 months, essentially. So you go into the town, you pay your $100. It's $101.75 if you use your credit card, like I always do. And you too can buy as is in Cicero. And they literally are like, all right, cool, your inspection date is, and they put it 9 months out.
Now, did you have any contacts at Cicero already at that point? Were you able to like lean in on call anybody like, hey, I'm buying this building. Anything else I should know? Like, tell us about any of the other inside stuff that you know, since you're so hyper local.
Yeah, I did. So one of the inspectors is really nice there that I met. He had been my inspector for another building in that area. And I was really excited because he was supposed to be, I thought, my inspector for this area. And he did the original point of sale inspection. So I was like, this is awesome. He actually got moved to different departments. That didn't help me as much as I thought, because it was actually pretty confusing because a lot of different people handled the inspections throughout. So there wasn't a lot of continuity. But he did tell me kind of what they were looking for. Again, they were looking for everything, and rightfully so. The whole thing needed to be, really remodeled. The building was really rough. So
you know what I never knew till about 6 months ago is Cicero has 80,000 plus people there. Like,
yeah, it's
that's
a huge town.
It's big.
Like that's up there. Like it's got to be in the top 20 cities in the state. Like
It's number 11 because I was going to do this as my Chicago fact. It is not the Chicago fact today, but
there you go.
2 minutes before we jumped down, I was like, "How big is Cicero?"
I don't think anyone ever recognized that. Like, Elgin, Schaumburg, like that's crazy. Like, so you say different areas or inspectors, like they have to have a pretty good sized government to be able to stay up on the rental side of things for that.
They have a small army of inspectors, to be honest with you. They have a lot of people, and they have like these different zones. And so, yeah, you might buy one building in one area and completely different inspector from the other area because it's a different zone.
Gotcha. All right.
So and any other, we're getting to the closing table here. Any other surprises, right? And I guess one other thing I want to point out is you're buying this thing at 40 grand a door. What is like a typical, stabilized market price per door at this point in time? Like, is that 60, 70? Like you're getting this at a discount because of the condition, but just give us 70, some point of reference.
70 to 75 for like a unrenovated, just, kind of solid.
Vintage stabilized.
Yeah. And if you're in a smaller site,
you have 30 grand a door to play with, basically.
Easy. And some of the smaller buildings that traded in that time period, there were a few Six Flags that sold for around, 100,000 a door. So there's I'd say 70, 75 up to 100,000 is kind of your.
What's the mix? Renovated. Are they all one bedrooms of these 13?
So we've got, when we bought it, there were 4 2-bedrooms, there were 6 studios, and there were 3 1-bedrooms. Was the mix when we bought it.
How many were vacant?
Yeah, I believe there were about 4 vacancies when we purchased it, 3 or 4.
Okay. So we get to closing. Any other goofiness before we start talking about tenants?
I mean, the closing was really smooth, and actually the seller was really kind, met me at the building, showed me how the boiler worked, like really nice. It's always interesting to me, just kind of a pro tip maybe for people that buy multifamily, if you can build rapport with the seller, it can be valuable later on down the road. So it's kind of like a user manual for the existing building.
Yeah.
Now we obviously renovated the building, so that's no longer probably valuable now, but just really nice person, met me at the building, walked me through the boiler, talked about some of the renovations that they'd had to do, problems they'd had, stuff like that. So that did set us up well when we were trying to figure out like if some of the tenants were, needed to go, things like that a little later. I was able to reach back out and get some advice on a few people.
I agree wholeheartedly. We actually had a building we bought in Portage Park a year ago, a 9-unit, and really great rapport. We're direct with the guy. We had to go through some hurdles to get the deal done. We get it done. We do everything we're going to say we do. Go to the final walkthrough to get keys. He replaces the hot water tank.
Wow.
Like he didn't have to. He's like, hey, this thing was leaking. I didn't want any issues with it. You guys have been great. Here you go. And I was like, well,
nice.
Yeah, like, dude, like,
push forward. Yeah, for you. That's awesome.
So leading up to closing, before we go to the next segment, the rehab part, anything in hindsight you do different on this? Is there anything you thought you could have done better? Is there anything you should react faster on? Like, give us any of your reflection on that part.
I feel like leading up to closing, I knew what I was doing and things went pretty well. I feel like most of my mistakes came post-closing, to be totally honest with you. So no, I think we were cruising pretty well up to closing. I was operating like a pro, but a lot of lessons learned came during the construction and initial management phase for sure.
Here's a question for you. You're a real estate broker yourself. On a deal like this, do you end up working a commission into the deal for yourself?
Absolutely not. I mean, we paid the commission for the broker because in this case, the seller wasn't willing to pay commission. So, to get an off-market deal or an opportunity at an off-market deal, I'd pay a broker all day for that. So, no, I have done that before on MLS deals, but I've never tried on commercial deals with, different brokers that are brokering it.
People ask me that question all the time, and I always tell them that don't screw up an opportunity over a dumb conversation.
I think that's the same reason. It's funny. A lot of people get their license so they can get those commissions, and I'm sure that was part of my thought process years and years and years ago. And it's happened for me twice because things were on the MLS where I was able to do that, but it's not a driving motivation now. In fact, I think the opposite. I have to go in the conversation with other brokers saying, "Hey, it's okay. You're safe." I actually want to make sure that they feel safe first to work with me as a principal, not as a broker. That I'm not trying to make a quick buck on them, that I'm trying to be a good buyer.
Yeah, I think it's there to negotiate, or at least offer up. Like, hey, listen, man, that was kind of what I always used it for. You said you used it a couple of times, and that's what ends up paying for itself over and over again to the cost. Because obviously, there's $1,000, $1,200 a year you gotta carry. But that's it's a good question. Everyone I was asked. I'm happy you went a little deep on that.
Cool. All right, initial management. What goes wrong here? You introduce yourself. We got some tenants who seem to be giving us some trouble. Let's talk through here.
Yeah, so we take over management. We're rolling. Things are great. We're getting locks changed. We're doing our regular takeover like it's a semi-stable building or light value add. Really, I should have immediately cleared the building out. As we started to renovate the building, I realized faster and faster, oh no, this is really not a building we should put our name behind. Like, we shouldn't be trying to manage this building like it's a safe place to live. We should have just given everybody a notice to vacate. I actually think it would have been the humane thing to do, the right thing to do. We would have had to rip the same Band-Aids off later. I've always hated that part of investing where you have to kind of like force people out. It's a very uncomfortable thing. But in this case, hindsight's 2020. This building, it would have been better for everybody if we just told everybody, hey, this place needs a ton of work. We got to clear it out and fix it. Unfortunately, it's better for you to move on. So we got there after about 2 months. We did a cash for keys offer for almost everybody in the building. And of course, the only ones that took it were the better tenants, the ones that were paying. So all the good ones left, they took our cash, and then the bad ones stayed to the bitter end when the sheriff finally came knocking. So that was probably my biggest mistake with this deal in general. I should have just cleared the building out.
But would they have even moved out if you'd gone day one and said, hey, this is the game plan? Like, would you have, yes, that's probably the right move, but would the result have been any different?
Yes, we would have been 60 days further ahead on the entire process, which what I learned with this deal, this was one of those where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. And so it's a great deal. Glad I did it. But every little bit of time I could have stolen the front end would have helped us down the line. So I think it just would have, the whole deal would have been 60 days further ahead, which is money, as you guys know. And it also may have allowed us to operate more inexpensively in the winter. Like, for instance, if we could have cleared the building out faster, we maybe could have turned off heating systems earlier, things like that. That we had to keep operating all the way through the winter just because we had occupants. And you got to keep them warm even if they're not paying, which is no fun.
So you ended up working with a contractor that you worked with in the past. So that's great. That's great for knowing at least what you're up against. It wasn't a brand new relationship. How much work did you do before closing? How much work, how ready were you to get going? And what did kind of those first couple steps look like?
Well, Mark, you know me that I'm always do too much. I need that who, not how book just about every day of my life. So mistake number 2 was I at least toyed with the idea. I didn't toy with it. I really tried it for about 2 months to general contract the project myself, which was not in every way the worst thing. I have a really great electrician that knows the area. I've got a couple other really good contractors. We've got a concrete guy. So we tore into this building, started gutting things, pull a few permits. And then I just realized, man, this is like one step above all my crew's level of expertise. So I called contractor. They, of course, were happy to jump on it. This is literally right in their wheelhouse. They go to town on it. But that was a mistake, and it was also kind of awkward throughout the process because I started out with the lender as a construction loan as the GC. And then we also had another GC. So it was kind of a weird, just annoying, awkward little thing to work through. But yeah, we got after it pretty fast. Like right out of the gate, we were running, demoing stuff, changing locks, changing doors, getting things rolling.
The scary part sometimes of that is you don't want to make the place look too good too fast because the people you want to get out, they'll stay longer.
Yeah, exactly. In this case, that never became an issue. In fact, I felt like the place never started looking good till almost the tail end, just because of some of the building systems that we had to change, like the porch and things like that. It was a rough building.
Yeah, I remember you sharing the pictures. I remember it looked, it looked pretty
That's
rough.
right. I texted Mark and he asked me if it was a third world country. It looked pretty bad. Yeah. I mean, we had to do kind of everything, even some stuff you wouldn't normally think about, like CapEx wise, like the back patio had to be totally, scraped and re-poured concrete because it was like, 4 different layers that were all crumbling. The exterior porches were covered in some sort of an illegal covering. We had to rip that off. Then we had to rip the porches off. And yeah, it was a lot of fun.
What was the initial budget? Like, what were you thinking the rehab would be?
Yeah, so I pulled up some of those numbers before so I could tell you, just so we could laugh at all my initial budget. So
it's the only thing those spreadsheets are good for.
Yeah, the spreadsheets are good for you to laugh at. My initial budget was like low 400s. I had a couple different scenarios. I was thinking we'd put in maybe 35 to, worst case 40 a unit. Once we actually dove into it.
Real quick, John, when you say that, what's the actual going into per unit? Right, because like there's like a per unit, and then like you're taking like, all right, then I got the porches, and I got this, and like that ends up being $5,000 a unit or whatever.
This was my all in, like looking at the entire building. So it still was a very good price for what we were doing. But
okay,
that was with us doing the plumbing, the electrical. We were trying to skip certain building systems, which came back to bite us. We thought we might be able to repair porches. I don't know why I thought that, but whatever. So there were certain things that I thought we could get away with. But I was thinking we'd spend roughly like 425, 450 all in. And when we brought the general contractor on, of course, there's an additional cost to that. So we sort of upped our budget at that point to just over 500,000, which would again put us at like 3940 a door, kind of a worst case scenario.
All right, let's drum roll, please. Where do we end up being at? And then we'll talk through why. Yeah,
a little closer to 700,000 when it was all said and done. It was ugly. So the things that went wrong. Well, the porch, I don't remember if you guys remember, but the lumber used to cost a small fortune because nobody could get it. So the porch ended up costing just a fortune. I think it was like $49,000 for the porches for 2 of them. So that was a budget buster.
Does it hurt now that lumber has gone down in price after?
That's what really hurts. I know. I feel like the porch could probably be 20% cheaper now or 25% cheaper now, but.
Can I ask you a question about the porch?
Yeah.
I'd love to know the mindset as the investor. You looked you looked at the porch, you knew something had to be done to it eventually. You know, you weren't going to get like the lifespan was there, but then you thought I could get away with like, what was the mindset? And obviously it was going to come back to you at some point. When was like the thought of, if I could just get to this point, I'll do it blank?
Yeah, I think with the porches in particular, I always go back and forth. There's part of me that knows that these porches are a ticking time bomb if they're older. But not being in Chicago, it's not quite the same level of scrutiny or stress on these porches. So, you could go in, add the brackets that you need, change the boards you need, kind of repair them in certain circumstances, and you're fine. Whereas I think if you're in the city of Chicago, you're probably better off just putting a new porch on so you don't have a problem later on. But we looked at it early on when the covers were on there. I was thinking, oh, cool, these illegal covers have saved the wood. So we'll pull that off. We'll repair them. We'll paint them, and it'll all be better. And not really. We pulled the coverings off, and as I looked at them more and more, I'm like, man, these things are just shot. Like, they're not safe. What am I thinking? So yeah, we ended up having to completely scrape them. And the system or the company that Cicero uses for third-party review for their porches is a company called Safe Built, and they're very thorough. The architect that we use, which does City of Chicago porches all the time, took us like 5 months to get a porch permit. So it was took forever to get that porch done. So yeah, that porch was not a fun project. That's for sure.
Go one level deeper on that. Safe Built. So basically Cicero, instead of their own people or themselves being on the line for inspecting quality or it's done right, they outsource that and have a third party come in, which I'm sure you pay for somewhere in the permit.
Oh yeah,
to put a stamp on it. Am I understanding that process?
Yeah, exactly. So I think probably rightfully so. They have a lot of inspectors, but their inspectors are not structurally trained. So they bring in this company. This particular company has an architect, a structural engineer, and a building inspector that all review what you're planning to do. And so the thing that's frustrating is the architect will submit the drawings, and the first person that looks at it is the structural guy. He wants a structural engineer to look at it. So the architect that we were using in Chicago, I believe they're probably self-certified or something like that. I'm not sure, but they're able to print these things out all day long. Well, they had to send it to a buddy who's a structural engineer to help them through that part of it. Then there was back and forth, 3 or 4 reviews. Then it went to the architect. He sends it back. He wants different things. So yeah, it just adds a lot of time to get your actual drawings. But the inspections are really easy on the back end because they've done so much work on the front end. It's like, cool, here's your porch. It's perfect,
Yeah. So with the additional time comes additional holding costs with your lender. Let's talk about, you told your lender one number. We bump it up a little bit because the GC is coming on. This number balloons. That difference, let's call it $500K to $700K. Is that coming out of pocket between you and your co-investor, or were you then renegotiating with the lender on, hey, this is what happened. Can we up the loan size?
Yeah, no, they don't. I mean, this particular lender doesn't really operate like that. So you just have to be able to come up with a difference. Now, it's not all at once, obviously. I mean, as you referenced, a lot of the cost that we had was holding costs because we had a building that was functionally vacant or economically vacant for a large period of time in the middle of the process. But yeah, you just have to be able to take that one on the chin and figure out a way to get it done.
Yeah. So for everyone out there want to do acquisitions, like, you need to understand, if you go over budget, if you don't finish the project, right? Like, if you can't finish it and you don't have that additional funds, you're in a very, very bad spot, right? Like, you need to be able to take some of those lumps and take it on the chin and be able to plow forward. Those
emergency funds are meant for just that, right? Like that's why we talk about having cash as a backup. What was the time frame on this? From when you originally presented this to your lender, you said, I'll have this done and I could refinance, which would be the ultimate exit, I imagine. You could talk about that, but what was that originally?
So, I mean, the goal would have been to do it in about a year. Because of some of the slowdowns we had along the way with the porch, there was another Safe Built project for a garden apartment. We had to get full plans and permits for that. So because of some of those slowdowns, it took about 13 months to get the final compliance. I'm speaking that as an affirmation because we still don't have it. We passed it before the holidays, but they still haven't printed it out for us. So we're going to project that out into the universe, and they're going to before this podcast episode airs, they're going to have given us that. But we're pretty much there. We've passed all the inspections, and so we're in the process of refinancing it right now, and we're exploring kind of two different ways to do it because obviously the lending environment's changed since 2021 in November, when you could borrow money for like 3%. Those days are long gone, which is fine. This deal will go okay, but yeah, it was about a 13-month process for total. And then we still have one last apartment we're filling up right now, which will again probably be filled up in the next few weeks. So we were still filling the building up on month 10, 11, 12. Finally.
How much is that rent you're asking for that last unit?
$1,175 for a 2-bedroom.
Wow, look at that. So you went from around 700 to 1175 on that particular unit.
Which I honestly think if this was in the better season, we probably could go a little higher even, because the finished product was really good. I mean, we have one of the best products in this town for sure. But unfortunately, we were trying to lease out in like October, November, December instead of in the main prime leasing season. So I was a little bit more aggressive trying to make sure we filled the place back up with the right.
Are these rent numbers close to what you were expecting? Like, did you hit the mark on those numbers?
I would say we exceeded the mark. I try to always set conservative rent, marks for when we're doing our analysis. So that way there's a little bit of extra juice we can squeeze out of it at the other end. So yeah, we're doing fine based on the rent projections.
So we're fine there. We got a $10,000 boiler cost comes off the expense column, right? You spent that money on, but like just NOI, if you had a $10,000 expense at I don't know if Cicero's an 8 cap or whatever it is, that's $125,000 of value.
Yeah. And we did a couple other really cool things because it was such a big construction project. I was really trying to start with the end in mind here, which is to get a lot of the costs set up correctly to create a better NOI. So we did individual hot water tanks throughout the building, separate heat. So really the only thing that the owner pays in this particular deal now is the water and the trash. So it really definitely boosts your NOI when you go back to get your refinance.
Yeah, but then the debt service kicks you in the teeth a little bit now, right? Do you remember what you underwrote or what you were thinking, and what are you exploring today?
It's funny because I think we, like a lot of people, we'd stress test like maybe 1% higher than the rates were back then. So maybe we were like, well, maybe we'll go to 4.5 or 5.
Yeah.
And I went really quick to 5.5 or 6. So I think we've been floating around. We're still on that bridge loan. They extended us. So we're still fine for a little while, but we're looking at either 6% with a local bank, or if we can get agency debt with a Freddie small balance loan, we can maybe get like 5.5, 5.75, something like that. So definitely not as attractive as it was, but that's the game we play.
Now, with such a major rehab, are you going to go the path of getting cost segregation study done so you could get some front end on that side?
It's interesting that you asked that. On this particular deal, we looked at it, but my partner couldn't take advantage of it, which is kind of a bummer.
He's not a real estate professional.
Yeah, so I don't think we are on this one. The other, I guess, silver lining to losing a lot of money is that we don't have to as much because we have like actual losses on this thing so far. So because it was kind of a loser year one, big time. So
yeah. So what happens here? I'm assuming you guys are going to leave in more money than you expected, just because the rehab, sounds like we hit our back end numbers, but the rehab blew up a little bit.
Yeah.
So therefore, instead of, hey, we'll pull out half our money when we refi, it's going to sit there, right? The deal still works, but this is going to either slow you down moving forward, or talk to us about that, like just the leverage standpoint of things and the liquidity aspect of going over budget.
Sure. This is the part of the episode we have to re-record in 3 months when I know the final answer, because we have kind of two paths before us. We have one path is a bank loan that'll just take us out 80% loan to cost. It's a relationship lender here locally that I've done a lot of deals with. That obviously leaves a lot of cash in the deal, but puts permanent debt on the deal so that we're in a good position moving forward. And the other path is that we could do a Freddie Mac small balance, agency loan. If the stars align, and that there's a couple ifs in there because our loan is pretty close. It has to be $1 million or more. If the stars align, we could still do a full cash out on that. So that would be obviously our preference, but it's not a sure thing. We're kind of small deal to meet the mark for that particular loan product.
if you do hit, let's play happy path forward. You do hit the mark. For our listeners out there unfamiliar with that product, what is the trade-off, right? Like you basically have to hold that then for X amount of time.
Yes, your term is normally like there's so many variables. It depends which one, but the one we would probably use that they've been doing quite a few of is this hybrid loan where you have 2 years of interest only and then another 5 years of fixed. And like you said, there's a trade-off. So it's a great loan. You get a lower interest rate than a local bank will give you. You get a 30-year amortization. You get 2 years of interest only where you can kind of lick your wounds and you get some cash flow back. That's all awesome. But if you want to sell, you're going to pay a pretty hefty penalty for those 7 years. And it's not a straight prepayment penalty. I don't believe it's like a defeasance, which is a super complicated math thing. I never liked math, so let all the smart financing guys figure out what defeasance is. But yeah, the thought process is you're not selling this thing during that time period.
Yep. So we got to check back in then, Mark, in 3 years from now, or 3 months from now. I'm sorry. Figure out where did John land on this thing?
Yeah, definitely.
After 90 days, we'll know.
Going back, we talked about lessons learned through the rehab. Anything else to talk about during the actual, call it lease up? Like, should you have shown units earlier? Did you try showing them too early? That's something I'm always guilty of, right? We're not finished. We try to get people in there and then no one likes it.
Did you retain any tenants at all? Did any of them upgrade to a finished unit?
I'm famous for retaining tenants. We retained 0 tenants from this particular project because, like I said, the good ones all bailed ship pretty early. And the bad ones, we couldn't get them out. It took forever. In fact, I think the eviction process was about a 7-month process in this particular project to get everybody out. So
what was the highest cash for keys you offered?
So here was the issue. We offered initially $1,000 for everybody. And like I said, one of the good people took us up on it right away. The issue was the people that we really needed to offer cash for keys with. It was hard to determine who the actual tenant was, A. And B, I think that there were so many criminals in there that $1,000 just wasn't enough because they probably had to stay there for legal reasons and all kinds of stuff. So it was, yeah, this was just not a cash for keys type of situation, this particular deal.
What's different about the Cicero eviction process compared to being in the city? Quicker, same?
I think it's pretty much the same thing. Mark could probably speak to that better than me, but Cook County is Cook County, and it's, we're in Maybrook Courthouse, which I guess there's maybe some very small functional differences for the attorneys, but as an investor, it's the same game. The sheriff is still 4 to 6 weeks behind, and the whole thing.
Yeah, exact same process that we talked with Jessica a couple episodes ago when we had her on. What was I going to say? One other thing I want to bring up before we wrap here is pest control. I know this building had a pretty crazy pest issue, and I see a lot of people that happens to when they get to the point of buying something or closing. What did you have to do here, and anything that you could share with us that you thought you do good or you could do better?
This particular building, I learned from some previous deals, so I did have some good lessons I was able to apply. It had a really bad cockroach infestation, maybe the worst I've ever seen. That's saying a lot. When we gutted the units, we took the walls out even between the kitchens and bathrooms completely. And we did a pretty heavy gut. So we reframed those walls. While the walls were open in the kitchens and baths, I had my pest control guy spray, I think probably 3 or 4 times while they were open because it was a slow remodel process while the walls were open. So he was spraying inside the walls. When we closed him, we still had him come back kind of on a monthly basis, and we'd still see recurring roach issues, which was insane, even after all that. Like the contractors that were there would say when they'd eat their lunch, they'd see them coming out. It's like insane. But, as of today, it's one of the best buildings we have from a pest standpoint. I don't think we have any issues because we just pounded that building for a whole year. And we were really smart about spraying inside the walls while they were open, which is kind of, I guess, another pro tip for you. If you're going to go to that level of rehab, you might as well pay a guy to spray the walls while they're open. So
you knew going into it, there was a pest control. Like, what do you budget for something like that for 13 units? Like, what was your budget to solve? You don't know about pests when you just know there's issues.
Yeah. I mean, we signed a contract that was like, I think it was like $60 or $70 a month with a local company, and they spray the units for like $15 a unit or something like that. So it's not, I mean, Mark, you can probably speak to this, but with pest control, it's like, if you're removing all the tenants, you're going to be able to get to the pests. It's almost like, you're not going to have a problem in there that's, keeping the pests going. So we didn't have too bad of a problem with pests. I think I budgeted like $1,500 for it or something like that for the year, which I think we might have even beaten that and been a little cheaper potentially. I don't know.
When you're hiring a professional, I think the thing you want to do is make sure you hire someone that prices around solving the problem versus, hey, I'll take 3 trips here and then if we'll figure out pricing if it goes from there. So as long as you kind of like you guys have this aligned goals of actually solving the problem, that's what you need to have.
Anytime a contractor says, let me diagnose it, I'm all ears, right? Like that guy, instead of just like, I'm going to go do this, like, okay, I'm listening, buddy. What do we got?
Yeah. Solutions oriented. No, I agree.
Yeah. John, I want to go back real quick. You had some troubled tenants in there. You're doing this major rehab. Any issues? Stolen tools, break-ins, stealing copper, like those things are going on parallel under the same roof. Did you end up having any issues there?
We had tons of issues. I'm glad you asked that because there's a lot of funny stories about that. So we kept having what I would call nuisance break-ins. They weren't really stealing anything of value, but they'd steal like little fittings for the copper or like for the electrician's stuff was stolen. So I decided to put up a camera system, and we threw up like a Simply Safe system, which worked really great. Me and one of my maintenance guys put it up on a Saturday morning. That Saturday afternoon, about 2 hours later, I went to a birthday party with my kids and the whole system lit up. Like it was like the roaches, only they were the people. They were coming out of the units. They immediately started climbing scaffolding outside, trying to break into one of the top 4 units. It was insane. So what we realized is these guys were all junkies and they were just trying to find whatever they could carry off. They didn't have cars. So they were trying to find whatever they could carry off to sell to get their next hit. Drug paraphernalia in the basements. They were shooting up all over the hallways. Like it was pretty wild, actually. It was like the wild, wild west. We also saw one random guy that kept sleeping in the hallway. Mark, speaking of the doors that didn't lock, and he would turn the light bulb every night so that he could sleep in the hallway and turn it back the next day. He was insane. So that was. And we knew that we had issues with these guys, but once with the cameras up, we realized how bad it really was. And I know Mark was laughing at me because we all went out to dinner, like a real estate networking dinner. And I had just the night before served one of these tenants. I was hiding in the unit below because my attorney was like, hey, you've got to serve this today or tomorrow because otherwise you lose another month. And the process server couldn't get out there. So I was like, all right, we're doing this. So we were pretty hands-on trying to figure out these crazy tenants that we inherited. And once we evicted them, those last 2 units where all the problems were, it calmed down really fast. No issues after that.
Stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. That's why I said you're never going to be that multimillionaire because you'll be dead from somebody shooting you.
Yeah, I know. It was probably not my brightest moment, but hey.
Man, these passive investments can be pretty tough, don't you say?
Yeah. What's the P in passive, right?
Cool. Mark, anything else? John, anything else we missed?
No, I think this particular deal, my partner and I always joke about it and say, it's probably the cheapest deal it's going to trade in a 10-year time frame. It'll be interesting to see if it's the best deal we did. One thing I do know is I'm excited to operate this deal for a year after all the hard work to get the systems in place to have a modern building, because it's definitely going to be a pleasure to operate now that we've gone through and really fixed everything, vent pipes replaced and drains and all the things that fail in apartment buildings. So should be a real pleasure to operate. And I think that the tenant experience should be one of the best of any of the buildings we manage now.
That's awesome. All right. You ready? We'll wrap.
Let's do it. A little energy, Mark.
I wasn't sure. I was waiting for you to jump in. That's
your line.
No, that's your
190 episodes in.
No, we take turns. So
got to ship him his caffeine pills, Tom. He ran out.
Listen, you've been on many times, and we're not going to take you through the serious questions, but just looking to know a good book that you read in the last year.
This is an interesting book that I'm rereading. That I feel like it's the first time I'm reading it. The 4-Hour Workweek. And it's so interesting rereading this book, all of the great little nuggets that I'm getting out of it that I missed the first time. So I know it's not a new book, but if you haven't read the 4-Hour Workweek, I'm getting a lot of value out of it.
It's funny. One of the books I've been referring out the most is the 12-week work year or something like that. It's all about kind of focusing everything a quarter at a time. So, all right, Tom, let's go to the Chicago Fact, man.
Real quick, I'm just going to piggyback. I'm reading rereading his Tools of Titans one. So Tim Ferriss wrote the 4-Hour Work Week. He has the Tools of Titan, which is just a summary of all his interviews, like best hits.
Yeah.
It's good to just pick up and at any point just read. So we're on the same wavelength there. We'll talk about it at our next dinner.
Yeah. Tim Ferriss bros.
All right. Chicago Fact. So little known fact about our guest today. He's actually a classically trained opera singer. And I believe Sharon on your team is also a classically trained pianist, if I remember that correctly.
That's true.
In Forte Properties, Forte, the Italian word for loud, usually seen in music. So tying that in today, and Mark, I know how much you love the opera. So the Civic Opera House on Wacker, just east of the river, if you can picture it. It's a city block long, about 8 stories high. It's actually the second largest opera theater in North America, with roughly how many seats? And your options are 785, 1,950, 3,500, 6,200.
Got it. 3,500.
Got it. You Googled quick enough? What was the got it for?
No, just like got it. I got the answer.
John?
I'm going with 3,500 as well. There's no
All
way
right.
it's 6,000 or whatever. That'd be
3,500. Nice job, gents.
Bam.
woohoo.
Total
Nice
wild
job,
guess.
Mark.
My one of my best friends I grew up with actually is a stagehand there. And I thought, I'm like, man, I wish I could text him right now. Like, I wish I could phone a friend.
Yeah. We started doing that. We'll give you one phone a friend like per month.
So 3,500 people. Yeah, that's awesome. That building, and that's on the riverside. The building's so boring. It's just like the brick wall. Like,
Yeah, and when you're crossing over the river going eastbound, it's like, well, okay, cool,
Yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
And then when you see it on the Wacker side, it's like, oh crap.
Yep. It's awesome. All right, man. John, thank you. Awesome. Always having you back on here. Appreciate you taking your time to share everything you're learning. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, you have to go on to our straightupchicagoinvestor.com. We are going to be adding, I think we added 3 new networking events on there as well too. So it's January 2023, and you got to make sure that you're planning your networking calendar right now. So John, thank you again. Tom, thank you as always. Listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.